Welcome, everyone, to the ConTech Exec Podcast. We're here again another week, another new interview. Now, Jeffrey Nesbitt and I we've kind of chatted before, just to kind of set things up and kind of get to know each other. But man, I just want to know, and everybody else wants to know, what's going on at, Slate AI.
Well, hey, Robert, first off, thanks for having me. It's good to catch back up again. I appreciate the time. There's a lot happening at Slate AI right now, and we're pretty excited about it. I think the second half of 2025 was the grand unveiling of really what's been, I would say, operating in stealth mode for about 4 years now, where we've been building the construction-specific large language model behind Slate AI. And so all the magic that people get to see now is really what's been many, many years of hard work of teaching AI. What is an RFI? What's a change order? What's a resource in a Primavera schedule, P6 schedule? So although it looks and flows very easily, there was a lot of hard work and effort by developers prior to our go-to-market launch this year.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you say 4 years in the 4 years in the development kind of phase of this whole thing, and then rolled out this year. Challenges involved in that, because I hear a lot of construction companies obviously considering, well, do we buy a product? Do we do this on our own? Kind of thing to solve our issues, especially maybe some of the larger market companies looking at it from their end kind of things. Kind of tell me a little bit about this, some of the pitfalls you might run into.
Well, when you're developing your own proprietary model assembly in a large language model using AI, and you're not using Copilot or a Chat GTP, there's a lot of heavy lifting involved there. It's really a collection of several different AI models out there, and it's not Copilot or Chat GTP. And we're using some predictive model collection methods. And what that's allowed us to do is exactly what we did, which is teach not only what is an RFI, but more importantly, what is the human intent behind an RFI, right? Why do we use these things? How do we use these things? Because the premise of Slate AI, our project intelligence tool, is really about layering AI over a contractor's tech stack. So it's not AI in one tool, right, in your schedule or in your operations tool. It's a layer over all of it. Because what we found is, contractors using many tools to get a job done, right? And a lot of times what happens is what's ever happening in your operations side, you may not be familiar with what's happening on your scheduling side, right? Those are different divisions, different roles. There can always be a conflict of interest between those two operational platforms, meaning I've got a submittal with a due date that's after my start date, my schedule. Well, how do I surface that? And what does that mean even, right? So being able not only to teach it what is an RFI or a submittal, but why is it important? How should it interact with different platforms, or like a scheduled activity in your Primavera schedule, for example? So again, a lot of heavy lifting there. It's meant to bring in the human intent. So like when we digest information, it's not just data, it's the workflows associated with that. And I think that's what's important, because the workflows is that human intent. So if we can ingest a change order or a submittal and understand the workflow behind it, and then when we're looking at it and we're lining it with maybe an email, an Outlook, or we're lining it with an activity in a P6 schedule, all those things have very different ways they operate from a workflow perspective, but yet in that job, every one of those roles or those peoples or those data points could be touching a job at every given point. So again, teaching it how to interact, where are dates important, where are dollars important, where is resources important, and surfacing what we call insights, right? That's really, at the end of the day, it's to be able to foreshadow, look ahead before a problem rises, right? And that's a powerful tool, but it's hard to do when you've got information in multiple tools, right?
I think that's the most important part that you were just talking about is context, right? Certainly you could look something up, utilize a Chat GPT or something like that to look something up and say, okay, does this make sense? Or even if you have some other AI research tool where you've got all your, contract specs in it, all those kind of things, and you're looking something up. But does it, again, correlate, let's say your P6 schedule with a date on it with, said specification and said submittal that has another date on it? Can it look at both of those and say, hey, there's a problem here because these dates don't really match up. Maybe I'm not using the same language in that, specification or submittal that it's going to recognize in the AI query, right? And so it's not going to pull it up and say, oh, hey, by the way, you've got an approved submittal here for some gear or whatever it is, but these dates aren't going to match up for when it's supposed to install or even when it's supposed to arise. And I think when you start talking about people that are looking for solutions, especially field solutions, those are the kind of things we want to look for. We want to be able to compare, not only the information, but the dates behind it, the surroundings back there. So, but we got to,
Right.
we've got to really dig into the problem, and that's a human thing. It's a very, very human interactive kind of thing. So I definitely agree with you there.
Yeah, the human intent is extremely important here at Slate. By no means are our tools replacing anybody. And my opinion is we're adding value to the tools you currently have, meaning we are surfacing insights that you statistically cannot surface yourself in a meaningful way. And we're serving them up to you to take action on, right? So within its Slate, you're not doing data entry. You're not, there's no keyboard stroking. This is what's great about the field is that look ahead, to your point, Robert, to say, hey, we've got a problem. We've got a submittal that's due after this activity we're scheduling or is starting, right? So our job is to surface that insight. It's the contractor's the job to say, yes, this is valuable. Yes, we need to action on it. We want to push this information back into our schedule. We want to push it over into a Procore or an Autodesk, Trimble, whatever operational tool you're using. Our job is to surface insights and allow you to make business decisions based on that.
Yeah, and so and I think that's the most important part. Again, surfacing the insight, because a lot of times there's a lot of siloed knowledge in the field. I think you made the example of, you've got a scheduling team over here, and then you've got a field team over here, right? And there's some siloed knowledge on the scheduling team. I was just having this conversation, it was either on LinkedIn or with somebody, and we were talking about like the CPM schedule. And I feel like a CPM schedule, a critical path, is more of it's an executive tool. It's an office tool. It says, hey, let's be logical and look here. If I can't get this piece until this date, right, then I really can't move past, right? That's what a critical path basically says. I can't move past it. The schedule changes if we don't get this, right, here. And then we were also talking about kind of the lean principles of the last planner system, but that's a field thing where those guys are trying to figure out how to get it built, right? And who's next in line and how that cycle time looks and who's going to be in the same space so we're not tripping over one another. Those are totally different things, right? But yet they're still reliant on, again, having maybe that piece of equipment or this piece done
Right.
in order to move on to the next thing. And that kind of coordination, that kind of insight, takes something like that. You're not going to have, the tools aren't necessarily available for that just yet, but we need something like that, right?
Yeah. It's important also, you have all these tools that we're using that we mentioned, but also your historical job information comes into play too. And that's another thing that we call those lessons learned, right? And so, I've been doing this for 25 years. I've started off and did estimating and loved it. And it was a big part of my life. And then moved over into the technology side and ran consulting practice for a while. But everywhere I went, I've always asked, do you have lessons learned? And I'm still waiting to find some. There is some great contractors. They have some, but it's very disparate, right? It's all over. It's in notebooks. It's in leather-bound books, on a job trailer somewhere. And basically it's static. And a lot of it is a little CYA, right? When you're doing
It's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot of it is CYA. Let's just be really, really clear about that.
And so, and sometimes the PM that started the job isn't the PM that ended the job. And so there's a lot of tribal knowledge that's lost, when you're doing that. And so When we can reach in to your operational tools and pull out all your historical information, then start aligning that with current activities and being able to give you examples of, hey, based on your last 6 or 7 jobs, we have a lesson we learned, and we looked at the last 7 jobs you did, and you've had these 50 to 200 problems, right?
And that comes down to context as well, being able
Yeah.
to recognize context, right? Understanding that these two things do, coordinate or correlate with one another. Basically, over the last 50 times you did this, this was kind of the correlation that we see. You're getting ready to do it again.
Right. Yes. And we see it and by the way, we're looking at your schedule, and this is now in 6 weeks, this is coming up. You're probably going to want to get in front of it. And then our AI will take it and say, here's some recommendations. Here's what we see. Here's our observations. Here's what we recommend based on these, 200 touch points. And again, it's not meant for you to automatically, it doesn't do anything. You have to say, yeah, this is valuable. You're right. I want to push this information back into the tool that our teams are using, right? So that's how you get your field teams aware of upcoming problems and challenges, right? It's
So
pushed back into Procore or Autodesk.
how do you do that? Okay, kind of like you said, you got a company, let's just, mid-sized, large company, whatever size it is. They've got a lot of historical data on, segmented places. Now, obviously, it needs to be on a drive somewhere. It's in an Excel spreadsheet. It's in daily reports from some time when and where. Well, it's somewhere in the system. How do you guys go about, kind of collecting and pulling all that together? Or do you work with your teams on getting them to organize their data? I talk about that a lot with teams. It's like, hey, you guys have siloed data all over the place. Your first goal, your first focus, really, before you ever start thinking about your next AI tool, or when you're thinking about an AI tool, is to really get your data in order.
It's the number one question I think I get asked every time we're talking with the contractor, which is, hey, my data is everywhere, which means it's nowhere in some people's minds, right? And by the way, it's disorganized. And that's where what's exciting about what we've built is we've learned to digest the disconnected data and turn that chaos into clarity. That's what we've been working on for those 3.5, 4 years, which is we understand we are pulling data, unfortunately, from Excel, right? Like stuff lives there. Some people are putting their forecast look aheads on their schedules in Excel and pushing it out to the field. Some people have like Procore, Trimble, Autodesk. They've got historical data in those databases. We're going to pull from that. Sometimes it could be job cost reports from your ERP, and of course the schedule to me, which is always is really the backbone of the central nervous system of Slate AI, because we want to correlate that back to those scheduled activities to serve up those insights. That's where the hard work came in, where we can pull that disorganized data in, and it's intentional workflows. That's what I call the human intent, is how did we use this information? How did it flow through a Procore? How does it flow through a P6 schedule? When we ingest those workflows, we recreate them in our tools. So not only the data we're bringing in, it's the workflows associated with us. And that's what gives us the ability to quickly spin this up. I would say if we were just doing a simple scheduling insights and lessons learned type, you were a new contractor, it's about a 30-day stand-up. It's really quick. It's amazing. It's beyond amazing to me because I've been doing this a long time. So kudos to the folks in the back that are the brains here and built that out. But it's ingesting that data in a meaningful way, and we turn it into the actionable insights. Again, like I said, we've taught it the proprietary model and how to assemble this information. So if it's cleaner, does it help? Of course. Does it have to be? No. Right? Because you're pulling in data and it's correlating to dates, activities, prior history, looking at that. Where's this type of scheduled activity happened across these 8 jobs? What lessons learned did we see? And again, it's agnostic. It's Switzerland, right? We're going to serve it up and it's going to be truthful because it's how the data was entered, or as truthful as the data was entered. I'll put that caveat on there, right?
Yeah, we got to be, and that's okay. That's probably a whole nother topic for a whole nother day because, again, verifiable truth is different than what somebody says is the truth, right?
Yes. And that's
But
why I think it's important, not to cut you off, but you have to have it. That's where having all these tech tools that our contractors have is of value because now we can correlate that data, those data points, and vet some of that CYA out.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of getting at was you want to be able to vet some of that out because I think ultimately what you want to try to be able to create for these folks is some sort of data governance, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've got a current idea of how structured their data is or not structured their data is. They've put some processes in place, even if it was with an Excel spreadsheet. Hey, by the way, I need you to fill it out in this way. Here's maybe some of the answers that you need to give, some common language, those types of things. And here's kind of an accountability structure for those types of things. It's a loosely defined data governance structure, but I would think that a system like this would be needed in order to say, hey, look, by the way, this is the way you've been doing it. So this is kind of the alignment.
Yes.
And I think what happens with a lot of contractors, they get nervous about that word. I get nervous. I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm going to fall asleep when I start talking about data governance because it's like,
it's a good bedtime
what is
story
that?
for kids. Sure to put them to sleep.
Yeah, what is that? That is such a boring topic, but it is so necessary because we have to have some sort of common language within our entity, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
have to have an accountability structure within our data now because data is so important. And we have 95% of your data that hadn't been used in the last 20 years, right? You've probably got a lot of historical data. You're probably drowning in it. You just don't know what to do with it because it doesn't make any sense to you. Or it's siloed or fractured or those types of things. It seems like, we have to deal with these kind of boring subjects first to really kind of tackle the problem that's ahead of us.
Yeah. Not all historical data is good data either, right? Hopefully you've gotten better as an organization as you've grown. And, I used to come across this when I was in ERP, construction ERP. I'd have a CFOs like, I want all my historical information for the last 50 years. I'd be like, why?
Bad idea. Yeah, why?
Why? It's going to cost more than the software. And I do even have confidence that that job in the first 5 years is efficiently run like it is, 35 years later, right? So you don't have to go back to the beginning of time and, pull in facsimiles and all that information. But, there is a window to say, hey, from here and moving forward. And, one of the cool things we found is, in particular with lessons learned, that database of lessons learned actually starts off very large and it continually starts to shrink if we're doing the same type of jobs. And the why is because if we're learning our lessons, we should have less lessons to learn on the next job that we go to of similar fashion, right?
Yes, if we're applying
Right.
the fixes, yes, we should be reducing the total number of lessons learned on this next job.
Yes. We should help. It should be a shrinking database, which is a weird thing to say. If we're doing our job right, it's going to get smaller and smaller until you take on maybe some new jobs that you're not familiar with.
And that comes down to that kind of accountability structures. Like if you've got the ability to see your lessons learned, but you're not applying them, then you really need to be held accountable for like, hey,
Yeah.
look, this is the answers were here in black and white. This is a very, very similar situation. I think that's the very difficult process of, again, we're getting into a situation of we're losing a lot of, well, say tribal knowledge or institutional knowledge, right? And those lessons learned from, I'll say that we'll call them the graybeards, right? The old guys like me who have probably made every mistakes there were to make in construction. It's tough to get it out of my brain and into something where somebody could utilize it.
Right.
Whether it was in some daily report that I had written years back or whatever. But again, I think the ability to go back to that, and I've always said this, we're going to come up with that challenge very, very quickly. We have the young kids coming in, don't have all the experience. We don't really want them making all the same mistakes because that's costly. But they're going to have to go through it some way or another. Either they're going to make mistakes or they're going to have a tool to help them to get through it because I don't know that the old guys like me are going to be around to give them all the advice.
No, it's extremely important. You hit one of the nails on the head, which is AI is great, but what are we solving with AI? Like, is there a pain? When I look at it, if we're not solving a pain, then why buy it? Just because it's AI, it's cool to have. That's bull, right? If we're not solving a problem, and you hit it on the head, one of the problems that we are looking to solve is the labor shortage, right? How
Hmm.
can we grab that tribal knowledge and use it to leverage and train junior people to avoid the mistakes that candidly we've been making over the years, right? So how can we
Hmm.
learn from that? And the other problem is rework. For me, that's a huge issue. It's over a $60 billion global issue. And what is rework? It's redoing the same thing, right, that we were scheduled to do because we made a mistake. And so that's where the lessons learned come in, like eliminating rework. It's rework costs roughly 6 times more than the original activity, right? Between
Hmm.
material procurement, delays, supervision, resource
Hmm.
scheduling, all that. But, one of the things that I found when I was consulting, the real ugly truth about rework is injuries and safety, right? You're twice as likely to have more injuries because you're repetitively repeating that same tasks. And oh, by the way, you're under the gun because now you're behind. Not only did you screwed it up the first time, now we got schedule delays. So we're rushing to do it. And I see people getting injured, right? And that's horrible. Like there's some tragic injuries out there. But it just keeps compounding. It's like not only is it the injuries, but guess what else happens? Your insurance goes up. Like that's a cost that contractors don't pay attention to. My bonding capacity changes for the following years. Like it just starts compounding. So if I can show you, you've made this same mistake over the last 7 jobs, and we can
Hmm.
correct that, that's a significant savings, right? And so that's two of the big things that we're aiming to challenge.
Yeah. I think the thing about rework, it's funny. It goes back to that old saying. My dad used to say it all the time. He goes, it's funny how you never have enough money to do it right the first time, but you've got plenty to
Uh-huh.
do it over again.
Yeah. Add that math up, right?
Yeah, I don't understand how that math works, and he never did either.
Yeah.
That was one of his biggest pet peeves was, having to do things twice or 3 times because
Yeah.
apparently somewhere in the design, and this is a big issue, obviously, kind of far beyond what we were kind of talking about, but, feasibility of the build, right? So this does happen quite a bit where you get a somewhat incomplete set of drawings. It goes through a process, right? Where if you have an incomplete set, you're trying to get clarification via some RFI, and then the RFI is misunderstood, or maybe it's not clear, or they send it over in a PDF. It didn't scale out
Yeah.
somehow. Somebody tried to
Never
use a
happens.
ruler.
Yeah.
Right. Never happens. Again, that disconnect between, I'll say, this is my understanding of it, right? Over here. And then somebody else looks at it in context, and then somebody else looks at it in context. Well, this is it's almost like this interpretation factor that we're running into. And sometimes it goes through these awful cycles of maybe 3 or 4 people, and the interpretation on the end is totally different than what was intended over here.
Yeah.
Getting back to what you were talking about, which was intent. What does this mean? What's the context of this? And what does it really mean when somebody says this, right? And when I say top track, what do I mean? When I say sub bass, what do I mean? All these different terms and technologies and things.
That's why surfacing it early is the greatest thing. And you know, not every insight you surface candidly is useful too, right? Because we look at things from a very data-driven aspect, and we can find something, but like, yeah, this is a 4-day delay, this activity because of this issue between the submittal and your scheduled start date. And you can look at it and go, hey, this is critical. Or it could be like a doorbell, right? And who cares? Like, and so you give it a thumbs down and the machine continues to learn, right? We don't surface those type of insights, but that's not our job, is to dictate what's important. Our job is just to surface that for you to decide. And I think that's the really fun, cool part of it. And then lessons learned, I think what we've been seeing, and this wasn't, I'll be honest, a use case. And as a former estimator, I'm a little embarrassed to say it, but those lessons learned, we think it from a very operational standpoint of like, hey, in 6 weeks, I'm starting this activity and I've got some lessons learned on it. I should actually, as an estimator, be looking at those lessons learned when I'm putting my
Hmm.
bid together. And so we're starting to see some traction there. And I'm like, hello, why wasn't I thinking of that?
Yeah, flashing. That comes to my mind so many times.
Yeah.
Probably got burned on a flashing deal. One time we were doing some windows on a commercial project, and there's, flashing involved, a special type of Z channel that
Mm-hmm.
needed to go in. Well, Well, who installs it? Is it the window installer, or is it the the framing people? Who does that? And is it powder coated? Is it painted? What is it?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. It is one of our examples in our lessons learned databases.
Well,
Yeah,
because it's so common. It is
yeah,
so common. It's one of the things that gets missed in the scope
uh-huh,
every time because if you think about it, the flashing in itself is not necessarily a call out on schedule of materials a lot of
hmm
times, but it'll be in a detail. Right, it'll be in a detail on the drawing. There's flashing involved here. Well, okay, let's go back. Where is it here in the spec of exactly what type of flashing, or is it a roll piece? Is it
yeah,
formed? Is it Z channel? What is it? Is it J channel? You know, it's so many different things that can go wrong in that process. And I think if you've been in the business long enough and done these jobs long enough, everybody's been burned by a
yeah,
by flash.
yeah. If we pull that up, everyone's head's usually nodding.
Yeah, everybody's run into
Yeah,
that one.
yeah, that's always a good one. Another thing that I didn't mention is the additional information that when you have an AI tool that you can add value to your own data is things like adding additional attributes to forms like weather, you know,
Mhm.
CSI codes, trades, phases, areas, things that you don't maybe have in your data today, right? And so using an AI tool to go out and look at those things adds just additional value to your data. So that's what's
Mhm.
really fun about AI is you can add attributes to static data that actually has impact, like working with a port authority, in offshore here, and they want to tie in like marine marine weather, right? Tides, rising tides, falling tides. It's important, right? How can we
Mhm.
use that, tie that to our schedule, look at our, activities, our lessons learned, and what can we do from that? Again, you mentioned it early. Companies have their own data types of things, their own SOPs or checklists, right? It's just
Right.
consuming it all and bringing it together in a meaningful way.
And I think that's interesting too when you start to talk about kind of, I'll call it data standardization, right? Because you really need to start, again, taking some of this data and being able to correlate it to one another because you call it different names. And you mentioned the CSI codes, right?
hmm
Which is, construction standard index, right? You want that, but its construction standard index is not the same as what your cost codes are,
Right.
right?
Yep.
But then some folks get it confused. Well, I'm doing the number 16, in whatever that is, mechanical or plumbing or whatever in that realm, whatever. But I'm like, okay, yeah, not the same thing. And it's not the same thing from this place to this place. Some people don't even use it. And if you're talking about a business that wants to scale, like they want to grow, guess what? They're going to have to get into that kind of thing. They're going to have to understand that we got to start to standardize language, and they're going to need probably some tools to help them figure out how to standardize their language and standardize their accounting for these things.
Yeah, I mean, right, the way we estimate a job is not the way we build and manage the job. It is not the way we account for the job in the back office, but yet everyone's touching the job at any point in the life cycle, and they all have sort of their data points. Into yours, it's something different, right? In
Hmm.
estimating, we're rolling it up from a parent-child relationship. We're building it in the field at the child relationship. We're tracking and accounting at the parent level, right? And so all
Hmm.
these things have different data points, but they're all essentially pointing to the same thing, right?
Well, then throw on top of that, an estimate's not the same as a budget,
hmm
right? And you may have more than one budget,
Yeah.
depending on where there's something that may change within this. And then it's stack change orders on top of that. Are we dealing with the same things? Are we dealing with the same codes for this change? Are we adding more codes to this change? It gets very, very complex very, very quickly for people to be able to track it.
Yeah. And that's really our mission. It's been my mission most of my career is you said it, it's complex. We're building some of the most complex jobs and projects in the world with the tightest margins. And there really is no error that's acceptable almost because they're so tight in the margins. So, how can we increase that visibility and add ROI to the bottom line? It really is, again, through new tools like AI. Like we, this is, I think, the first thing that's come out that we can actually harvest and leverage for a very meaningful impact. I think we have some hesitation, and rightfully so, new technology, new stuff coming up. I say
Yeah.
you should have that, and I'm okay with a prove it type of situation, because once you show it and you prove it, then the confidence level builds and you actually utilize the tool, and then it gets better, it gets smarter, right? So we need that interaction from the humans to help advance our tools, candidly.
And I agree with you there. It kind of leads me to this next kind of question about, you know, trends in the industry. Obviously, everybody's talking about,
Yeah.
it's the biggest thing I don't think anybody can talk about anything else sometimes,
Yeah, that's
right?
a fair statement.
Right, because, they've just used Chat GPT for their first time or 20th
Hmm.
time, whatever it is, and it says, "Oh, by the way, I found this out."
Yeah.
And then it's just on everybody's mind. Disney just did a deal this today. The news came out today that they've just done a $1 billion deal with, Chat GPT to utilize all their stuff. And I think that's interesting, why they're, what their strategy is on that. Um, it's like construction. Do you find that the trend, it's going to take just about as much time to roll this out into construction because we are so complex and so kind of hesitant about technology? And I won't say hesitant, but I'm just saying we're stuck in a legacy mode a bit. Even the legacy software may only be 30 years old, 40 years old, kind of thing. It's so all consuming. It's very, very difficult to really justify that change management now that we're moving into what I'll call the age of AI.
Yeah. What's interesting, what I'm seeing is I'm not a salesman, but if I was, I'd want to sell construction AI, because to your point, everyone will pick up the phone. The old days of a sales guy trying to get in front of a contractor was hard. If you're selling an ERP, like, who changes ERPs once every decade, right? So, but something like this, it's everywhere now, and they're seeing it and they want to understand it. And and a lot of companies, people are going out there and just showing up and throwing up, like, here's a demo. But again, back to that point of, what's the ROI? What are we trying to solve? So you have multiple tools out there as contractors, and candidly, a lot of them now are building their own AI within their platform, and they should. They're using Copilot or ChatGPT wrappers to sort of help with workflow automation, and those things that where I think AI is really strong. The challenge is you're using multiple tools. And so
Yes.
is the
You're
AI
you're
going to
back to
talk?
that same thing. You're back to
Right.
the same problem you had before, where you've got siloed information or you've got fragmented tools where I got to go over here to do this one and it doesn't talk to this one. So that's problematic.
Yeah. And so that's a challenge. And I think therein lies the opportunity. And not to say that there's going to be some industry AI that sits over everything, but I do think some type of agentic layer over multiple tools to surface meaningful information is a step in the right direction, in addition to utilizing those AI components within the platform, whether it's a Procore, Trimble, Autodesk, because they've got value as well to move information, to decipher information with their platform. And then, hey, if we got to bring in other platforms, that's where it gets a little sticky. And, that was the challenge that we're trying to solve, which is, hey, we've got multiple tools and
Yeah.
multiple workflows.
And I think you're right there. I think you're absolutely right there. You've got companies that have been utilizing this stuff for a long time already.
Hmm.
They want to continue to utilize it because they've got investment in it, not only time, money, and knowledge investment in it, right? They want to be able to utilize that information. They probably still want to be able to utilize the tool because that's an
100%.
easier transition.
Yes.
They want to be able to transfer into this digitized information, right? But they want it to be seamless, and they don't want to disrupt the whole process. They don't want to tip over the apple cart, so to speak,
Yes.
in order to find the best apple, right?
I agree. It's for me, I have a consulting background. It was the people, processes, and technology's always been last. As a tech guy,
Yes,
I'm saying it's the
still
last
is.
piece. right?
Still is.
Do I have
Yeah.
the right people in the right places doing the right things? Now let's apply the technology to help leverage those people to expedite, make their jobs easier and inform them. So I encourage people, if you're using a Procore, Trimble, Autodesk, like you continue to use those. I encourage you to use the AI within those platforms. But
Hmm.
if you have a large project and you're using one of those platforms and you're using Primavera or Project, you've got some things in your SOPs, you've got your historical job information, right? That's where a Slate would come in. And what's really cool about it is, because again, processes is a big thing for me, is you're not doing anything other than analyzing the data and validating it, and we push it back into Procore, for example, right? We'll push it back, like this is a valid insight. We push that data back into their platform where the workers and end users are used to doing their daily activity. So now you can action on that in a platform you're comfortable with. So
Yeah,
I think it's very
that's a great idea.
non-invasive.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I often tell folks the very same thing. We need to examine your people and your processes before we really start to talk about what software
100%.
we're, because we can come up with 1,000 different, products, and none of them might address what you really have got going on in the field. Because and there was a comment again this morning. I had a conversation where we were talking specific about this. Is like it's always been about the people and the processes. And I think it will continue to be about it. As much as we want to talk about how AI is moving into our space and how much it's going to help us, right? We have got to get folks to say, just take a breath for a second. I know you're not going to like this, right? Mr. Contractor, Mr. Specialty Contractor, Mr. GC, you're not going to like this, GC owner. You're going to hate the fact, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's not your technology that's probably broken. It's probably not. Most likely is you've got a broken process and then you're just adding more work onto that broken process and then it's just breaking it up into bits. It's like having a bag of chips, they're all in perfect form when you first get it and then you crush it. And what happens? Well, you got the same amount of chips, but now they're all broken. It's right. There's no logic in that. There's no logic in saying that, oh, I'm going to take this amplifier and put it on this noise and it's going to make it sound better. It's not. It's just going to amplify the noise.
Yeah. I can tell you when I was consulting, I would be out in the field working with the field staff, superintendents, PMs, and just observing what they're doing. They're doing progress tracking, they're filling out, daily forms, and you'd look and I'd say, well, what is this form all about? They're like, oh, we have to fill this out. We've been doing this for 30 years. Okay, great. I take it at face value. And then when I get to the back office and I'm with the accounting staff, I'm like, now show me what you're using this form for. And they'd be like, crumble it up, throw it out. Like, we don't use it anymore.
CYA.
Yeah, and I'm just like, well, what are we doing here? Like, and you see that with organizations that's been around a long time, like, well, we've always done it this way and we keep doing it, even there's no value in it, right? Or the data
Yeah.
is irrelevant. So yeah, to your point, you got to fix it internally, the processes, because people are like, I want to get rid of this software. And after you go in and clean up their processes, you're like, that software you had actually works just fine now, right? It's like the
Yeah.
people and the processes. You don't have to go shopping,
Yeah.
Sometimes you
Yeah.
do,
No need
but
to show.
yeah,
Yeah. Sometimes well, again, if you want to move that data from, one space to the next, yeah, maybe you need something different. Maybe if it's a legacy software that's, not quite keeping up with where you want to go, right? Yeah, you probably need to examine
yeah,
that, right? But there's some really, really smart people out there, like the folks at Slate AI, right? Hey, we kind of already got this figured out, how we can
yeah,
kind of pull this information from over here, and kind of pull this together for you, right? So
yeah,
again, it's not necessarily the technology. Is like, let's talk about your people and your process, first.
yeah,
That's the first thing I do when I get a consulting client and then they want me to examine things. I run them through a series of questions and then I compare those questions from all the different sources, and that's when I start to recognize this is where the BS is, because
yeah,
you're going to get this whole glossy language from the upper echelon. You're going to get a glossy language of, I think it's kind of going like this. I think we got a few problems here, here, and here. And then you kind of get down into the weeds of it a little bit and you go, yeah, you're kind of right. But I'm going to tell you, you're probably glossing over some of the detail. And your problems probably lie here, here, and here. And it's really when you get into those details, like they say the devil's in the details, right?
Correct.
And that's where it ends. That's where it ends up happening. It always ends up in some person's hand or a group of people's hands where this is your bottleneck. This is your pain point, and it could be fixed probably fairly easy. Maybe it can't, it's just how you evaluate that.
Yeah. I think that's one advantage, because that was a very manual effort traditionally. I would go in and do these things like you're going and doing these things. I think that's where AI can really shine too, is to help surface those things or those conflicts, right? For you to correct.
I actually use AI to utilize those questions and analyze.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a huge step where you can help jumpstart things, right? Right. Still going to take human input, human attention to execute, but AI's job can help surface it for sure.
Right. I think that is the benefit of AI. It's the one thing that has not only helped me, but has helped companies already, is the speed of analytic. It's how quickly can I get to the answer, right? As opposed to, one, not how quickly can I get to it, but who has it? How far are they away?
Yeah.
Can I get a hold of them? Do I send them an email? Do I have their phone number?
Fax them.
Yeah, a fax. Lord.
Still happening, believe it or not.
I'll bet it. Yeah, I'll bet it does.
Not
That's
as
interesting.
often, but yeah.
Yeah. So, Jeffrey, obviously time flies when you're having fun, but I want to ask, and people are going to want to know, Slate AI is, now on the market. How did they get a hold of you? How can they look at your product?
If you just go to slate.ai, there's a contact us button. I don't know if you're going to share information. I'm happy to share mine. Reach out and contact us through that for a demonstration and presentation to see what it looks like, right? And what pain points does it solve? Because again, to me, at the end of the day, there's a lot of cool things out there and gadgets I want, but it's really not going to solve anything for me in my own personal life. But boy, that would be really cool. But on the business side, we have to actually solve something. We want to fix the rework problem, right? We want to help with safety and quality. We want to help junior staff see senior leadership level insights to help them make better decisions when they're getting started on their jobs, right? So we want to check some boxes and buckets. And if those are important, then yeah, Slate AI is where you want to go.
Yeah, I think that's important too. I love that. I love the adage of, hey, we need to see leadership decisions at this lower level, because we have to understand the why behind some things, and you learn something from it too, especially if you start to investigate the why, right? You don't just take it at face value. You start to look at it and you go, oh, I wonder why they did that, and then you can learn something from it. So I think that's important. And I will leave Jeffrey's information in the show notes. So if you're on Spotify and you want to look at the description, it will be in there. If you're on the YouTube channel checking this out, it will be in the description on the YouTube channel. So I'll leave those links in there for Slate.ai. And Jeffrey, I'll probably leave your LinkedIn contact in there as well. And then folks can reach out to you from there. But yeah, it has been a fantastic, interesting conversation. I'm excited about this product. I really am, because I really think it's got some potential. And I appreciate our time together today.
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate the time. And I am very excited about where we're heading as an industry. My focus has always been industry first. If we're not helping it and we're hurting it, we got to stop what we're doing. So I'm excited about this. And I tell everyone, you got to explore the AI now, because this is our fastest moving tech in our space since the beginning of tech, candidly. Even if you don't buy today, you got to start the journey to understand it and not get left behind.
Yeah, folks, Jeffrey's absolutely right. It is time to get involved. It is time to start understanding, start taking a look and getting prepared, because this train is moving, and it's not moving any slower. That's for sure. It's moving very, very quickly, and it's time to be prepared for that. And that's what we do here at the ConTech Exec. We try every week to bring you new guests and new insights to let you understand what you're up against and what's good things to prepare for and some good products out there that you could possibly use in your future. So until next week, we'll see y'all soon. And tell a friend about the ConTech Exec, because we've got a lot of good news in here.
Absolutely.
All right, y'all. We'll see you next time.